Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun forced himself to simply deal with the incredible itchiness he felt. To deal with those areas where he couldn't scratch, he simply clamped his legs together tightly. His face was a purplish-red color, and tears continued to flow down his face as he sneezed over and over again. There was also a burning heat that filled him that was driving him crazy. This is ridiculous bullying. You people are all bullies. As he shivered, rage coursed through him, battering at his mind, filling him with thunderous rumbling sounds. Finally, he howled and slapped his bag of holding to produce a handful of pills. He wanted revenge. He wanted these imps to realize that on the treacherous path of concocting mystery pills, Bai Xiaochun was the top expert. And experts don't like to be challenged. As it happened, the first thing he pulled out was the strange soul medicine he had used in the wildlands when he was in conflict with the other two celestial necromancers. It was a toxic medicine that led to flatulence and even diarrhea. However, as soon as he pulled the pills out, he realized that there was a problem. When inventing and concocting this type of medicine, he had never come up with a name for the pill. Now that he was using it in public fashion, it definitely needed a name. You people are going to know exactly what makes Bai Xiaochun terrifying, he shouted. Body purifying filth expelling pill. The pills flew forth, and then he waved his sleeve, causing them to explode and become a fine powder that spread out on the wind. In order to make the best use of the effects of the medicine, he employed the greatest speed he possibly could to fly around and throw out as many of his body purifying filth expelling pills at the dark concoctors as he could. Cracking sounds rang out, and the imps looked around in astonishment. After all, most of them had a hard time recalling how long it had been since someone had dared to use pill concocting to challenge them. In fact, it actually got them excited, and many threw their heads back and laughed uproariously. Ha ha ha, who would have thought that we would find a kindred spirit here? Nice job, test tube. Very nice job. I like you, test tube. I think I'll try your medicinal pill to see exactly what it can do. Don't even think of trying to steal this pill. This is a pill duel. I can't believe that there's a cultivator who actually dares to take on us dark concoctors. Hey, test tube, I really admire your bravery. The dark concoctors didn't seem afraid at all, and excitedly struggled to be the first among their fellows to get to the medicine. It was with almost drunken passion that they tried to inhale the crushed powder. Bai Xiaochun almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. Furious, he threw out even more medicinal pills, not even bothering to worry how it might affect his overall supplies. Before long, nearly the whole area was covered with the powder from the body-purifying filth-expelling pills. The imps struggled excitedly to breathe in the powder, and then began to wait in anticipation to see what would happen. Soon, strange expressions broke out on their faces. In the blink of an eye, furt sounds began to ring out, and some of the imps even clutched their stomachs and squatted into a sitting position. It causes diarrhea. Hey, test tube, you're plagiarizing our medicinal pills. Is that all you can do? I'm impressed. Not a bad medicinal pill. However, definitely not on the level of our pills. You think this kind of pill will earn you the title of Patriarch Mystery Pill? I can think of 1,600 different ways of neutralizing this thing. Numerous imps began pulling out a variety of different antidotes, which they calmly consumed. Clearly, their level of endurance surpassed anything Bai Xiaochun could have imagined. Many of them continued to loudly expel noxious gas, and yet, simply stood there, looking completely calm and unfazed. Furthermore, the derisive looks and sarcastic comments made the entire thing even more humiliating. Hold your horses, Bai Xiaochun said, snorting coldly. Do you really think I would challenge you with only one medicinal pill? With that, he waved his hand to produce some of the medicinal pills he had created in the bloodstream sect when trying to work with refined corpses that caused long hair to grow out everywhere on one's body. A vast number of such pills flew out, followed by popping sounds as they exploded. As the powder spread out, the imps seemed to be taking everything completely in stride. They didn't even attempt to prevent the medicinal power from landing on them. Before long, they began to grow long, luxuriant hair of various colors. Within moments, many of the dark concoctors looked like big balls of puffy fur. This medicinal pill isn't bad at all, so, it grows hair. Heavens, how come I never thought of that? It's a bit itchy though, so, you do have a bit of skill after all, test tube. It won't do you much good though. Check out this antidote. Although the imps were initially shocked, they quickly realized they could neutralize the medicinal pill, causing the newly grown hair to begin to shrink back. Bai Xiaochun wasn't very worried yet. He hated these imps quite a bit already, and was also a grand master in the Tao of medicine. Furthermore, he knew that using one medicinal pill wouldn't be as effective as using many. Therefore, he began to throw out more pills. Before the entire group of imps could completely deal with the previous pill, his eyes glittered as he resorted to using one of his 3 super pills, the breakup pill. Incredible rumblings sounds shook heaven and earth as the breakup pills exploded, transforming into a powder that filled the area. It didn't even need the wind to move, and it was immediately absorbed into the bodies of any of the imps that it touched. Breakup pills were very unique, and the dark concoctors almost immediately noticed this. Even from the way it disseminated, they could tell that there was something different about it. And yet, they were still confident, and didn't even back up. Some of them were even laughing loudly, and intentionally breathing it in. It didn't take long before, among those who had intentionally breathed it in, strange expressions appeared. This medicinal pill has some very strange qualities. It actually affects your emotions. What pill is this? Before any of the imps could begin to study the matter closely, the medicinal effects of the breakup pills began to manifest. Get away from me. I've decided that my true love is the path of medicine. I'm not meant for you. Let's break up. Break up. From now on, you do your thing, and I'll do mine. And by the way, give me back all those medicinal pills I gave you. A buzz of conversation immediately filled the dark concoctors. The emotional changes among the imps were clearly visible, and as for those who hadn't been infected by the breakup pill, they were clearly shocked to see what was happening. Furthermore, they quickly took out various antidotes to see if they could neutralize the effects. However, for the first time, their incredibly effective ability to neutralize medicinal effects did not go as smoothly as before. Although there was some success, it wasn't possible to completely negate the effects in a short time. By now, Bai Xiaochun's strategy was starting to take effect. Not only did they have to worry about the growing hair, but there was also the effect of the breakup pills. And there were even some who were still dealing with diarrhea and flatulence. As the cries of alarm rose up, the dark concoctors finally began to show signs of fear. Even the spirit automaton up in the air was surprised, and was finally starting to realize that he might have underestimated Bai Xiaochun. And yet, not a one of them had truly come to understand Bai Xiaochun. Of his 3 most powerful pills, he still had 2 more to choose from, both of which were so shocking that even ghosts and gods would fear them. They were his trump cards when it came to medicinal pills, his fantasy pill and his aphrodisiac pill. They were equally vicious, and it was hard to say which was more powerful. If he had greater reserve stocks, he wouldn't have saved this pill, but now, he gritted his teeth and produced an aphrodisiac pill. As soon as the pill appeared, it was as if the spirit of the world around him shuddered in terror. Thunderous rumblings filled the area, provoking a gasp on the part of Bai Xiaochun. But then, a look of pity appeared on his face as he flicked his sleeve and tossed some aphrodisiac pills out. Weep, struggle, it will do no good. You think a lot of yourselves, dark concoctors, but in a moment, you will know who your true patriarch is. The aphrodisiac pill, one of Bai Xiaochun's 3 most powerful pills, had proved its formidability on numerous occasions. There could be no doubt that it was peerless in its ability to drive people to complete insanity. If it weren't for the fact that his stocks were running low, he would have thrown out even more than he had, just to make sure that these bastard apothecaries knew what it meant to tremble in despair. Besides, whether it was in terms of the physical size of the pills or their strength, they were far beyond anything that these diminutive dark concoctors could bear. Even the relatively small amount that he had tossed out effectively counted for 10 times what it normally would have. With one flick of his sleeve, Bai Xiaochun deployed roughly 1/3 of the total number of aphrodisiac pills he had left in his bag of holding. It was even as the dark concoctors were still dealing with the breakup pills that this new pill arrived, a pill that would lead to a catastrophic tribulation the likes of which they could never conceptualize, even in their wildest imaginings. Thumping bangs could be heard as the pills exploded, resulting in something quite different than the explosion of the breakup pill, or any other pill for that matter. This pill created a pink smoke that was somehow indescribably enticing. Thanks to repeated testing and improvement over the years, that pink smoke moved with freakish speed, almost instantly covering the entire area. Even those imps who were quick to react still felt their hearts beginning to race in unusual fashion. They quickly performed incantation gestures, either utilizing certain techniques to negate medicinal effects, or producing medicinal pills that could create wind, which they hoped would drive the pink smoke away, or melt it. Unfortunately for them, the smoke created by an aphrodisiac pill was not the type that could be negated by ordinary wind. As the dark concoctors struggled in complete futility against the aphrodisiac pill smoke, Time seemed to slow, and all heaven and earth came to be covered with pink smoke. In the blink of an eye, it became apparent that no matter what techniques or medicinal pills the dark concoctors used, they were like peasants meeting an emperor. They were the ones to be driven away as the entire world became pink. Some of the imps tried to back up, but by the time they did, it was too late. Some of them, upon inhaling the smoke, began to shiver in unprecedented fashion, and their eyes turned crimson. From the expressions on their faces, it seemed like they would lose their minds at any moment. What pill was that? Heavens! Something's wrong. Very wrong. Why do I feel myself heating up? What's going on here? Ag, I'm gonna lose my mind. I can't control myself. I'm gonna blow. I'm gonna blue www. Soon, the dark concoctors had devolved into a complete uproar of madness and disbelief. Many of them simply began howling as if they had gone completely insane. Bereft of thinking ability, they were overcome by waves of intense heat, and began to pant heavily. Those among them who were unusually tall and burly seemed to have transformed into something completely different than before. Howling, they turned and pounced on their fellows. If everyone within the smoke caused by the aphrodisiac pill had been affected, it would have been less horrific. But there were simply too many imps, and only a portion of them had breathed in the smoke. That meant that many of the imps who were pounced on had never ingested any of the aphrodisiac pills. Blood-curdling screams erupted out, as well as bellows of madness and terror. What are you doing? Hey, why you? No, get back. Heavens, how could you be doing this? Damn it, 5 of you at the same time. Get away from me. Get away. The world was thrown into complete and utter chaos, to the level that it defied description. Anyone who could see it would likely begin to question the meaning of life. What was even worse was that many of the imps were still under the effects of the breakup pills. When those effects were combined with the effects of the aphrodisiac pills, there was no way to dispel them. It would push the victim back and forth between lucidity and mental derangement, a volcanic mental bombardment that few could withstand. If that were all there were to it, it might not have been much to worry about. But at the moment, there were simply too many pills in the mix. When the pills that grew hair were added in, along with the body-purifying filth-expelling pills, it was like pouring oil onto a fire. Howls of grief, swearing, cursing, agonized shrieks, and other sounds of struggle caused heaven and earth to shake violently. Those imps who were some distance away, and had thus managed to avoid being affected as much, had it easier off. But those near the epicenter were in absolute pandemonium. To those among the dark concoctors who were still in possession of their mental faculties, it seemed like they were now in the depths of hell. As they looked around, they trembled, they gasped, and then they focused on Bai Xiaochun, their expressions those of both astonishment and rage. Are you looking to die, test tube? How dare you duel with us in medicines? You're dead, test tube. You're going to lose for sure. These medicinal pills might be terrifying, but we can negate them. The lucid imps were shaken, but they were a proud lot, and their confidence bolstered them. Although the dark concoctors had long since broken up into numerous smaller tribes, they could still work together towards a common purpose when necessary. Therefore, the lucid ones among them began to pull out their most treasured medicines to neutralize the effects of the aphrodisiac pills. True to their word, they were very skilled, and as the treasured pills flowed out, the toxins were slowly neutralized. The smoke from the aphrodisiac pills began to disperse, and its medicinal effects were being suppressed. Slowly, the imps who had been affected by the aphrodisiac pills began to come to their senses, and when they realized what they were doing, screamed so loudly in rage that the sky went dim. Things were going exactly as Bai Xiaochun had predicted. As he hovered there in midair, he laughed coldly, his expression that of complete pride as he waved his sleeve to produce another collection of medicinal pills. Oh dark concoctors, do you really think that your patriarch would only have those pills on him? As I told you, when I get pissed off, I frighten even myself. Next up, fantasy pills. With that, he tossed out all of the pills he had just produced. Rumbling sounds filled the air as the fantasy pills were unleashed. Although fantasy pills weren't necessarily as famous as aphrodisiac pills, they could technically be considered the first mystery pill that Bai Xiaochun had ever concocted. If one said that aphrodisiac pills could unleash ultimate catastrophe, then fantasy pills could be said to unleash all of the potential of one's desires. The smoke spread out in the blink of an eye, pushed by the power of Bai Xiaochun's celestial cultivation base to rapidly fill much of the world around him. Tribulation was nigh. Before, there had been some lucid dark concoctors who could use their vast stores of medicinal pills to aid their maddened fellows. But now, as the smoke from the fantasy pills spread, all of them began to tremble, whether they had been lucid or not. Gasps could be heard, and eyes went blank, and then, the dark concoctors began to descend into hallucination. One of the imps curled up into a ball and tried to throw himself around like a medicinal pill. Throw me, I'm a medicinal pill. Ha ha ha, I'm the first godly pill in all creation. Another one began bashing his head against a nearby rock. In another area, a group of 5 imps linked hands and began to sing. They were all going crazy. The dark concoctors had gone mad. The final unleashing of the fantasy pills completely stripped them of their mental faculties. Because of the stacked effects of the pills, many had long hair, and some were still plagued by horrific flatulence. Those who had been temporarily saved from the aphrodisiac pill once again were gripped by its madness. Even powerful gods who saw this scene would be struck by the sheer preposterous nature of what was happening. Bai Xiaochun only looked at the scene for a moment before averting his gaze. And it almost wasn't necessary to mention the spirit automaton up in the sky. Originally, he had been proudly waiting for Bai Xiaochun to make a fool of himself. But now, he was completely and utterly stunned, to the point where he almost didn't dare to believe that what he was seeing was true. The dark concoctors had gone completely mad. The screams, the gasps, the bellows, and even the occasional sighs of contentment mixed together until the spirit automaton shivered and rubbed his eyes. This is impossible, he muttered to himself. I'm definitely seeing things. Ha ha ha, that's right, it's an illusion, just an illusion. As of this point, his understanding of life was changing completely. Unfortunately for him, after double and triple checking, and even checking his ears to make sure they were working properly, he realized that the scene in front of him was real. At that point, he gasped, his mind reeling. They're the dark concoctors. Even the sovereign feared them. Damn it, they must not be the real dark concoctors. He wanted to cry. Never could he have imagined that the shameless cheater Bai Xiaochun would actually be more terrifying in pill concocting than the dark concoctors. It's fine, I'll still be the victor here. The dark concoctors' true strength lies, not just in their ability to concoct mystery pills, but in their tenacity and unyielding nature. That is what makes them truly terrifying. I can say with absolute confidence that, once the dark concoctors come back to their senses, they will work hard to rise to the top again. They will not allow anyone to pass this level. The spirit automaton was almost going hysterical trying to comfort himself. After all, even though he wasn't ready to admit it, Bai Xiaochun was almost too terrifying to deal with. As for Bai Xiaochun, as he hovered in midair, he contemplated throwing out some more medicinal pills. However, after patting his bag of holding, he realized that his stores were running too low. No, as an apothecary myself, I understand how people like us think. Successful apothecaries have to be tenacious and unyielding. Giving up is not an option. You must have obsessive focus. He glanced worriedly back at the dark concoctors, well aware that although he could temporarily put them at a disadvantage, they would eventually regain their senses. And when that happened, the fact that he was running low on pills would be problematic. Eventually, he would run out, and then he would most likely suffer a defeat at the hands of these imps. And he could hardly stand to think about what that would entail. After some thought, his eyes glittered, and he patted his bag of holding. How could I have forgotten that I have another outstanding asset other than my medicinal pills? And that is none other than my concocting methods themselves. Strange things always happen when I concoct. In the past, I would have to work hard to avoid such scenarios or contain the effects. But here, strange effects are exactly what I need. As far as the ingredients, I don't have too many, but the dark concoctors surely do. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he burst into motion. Taking advantage of how the dark concoctors were in the grip of madness, he headed toward the nearest of their tribal headquarters. Just as he had guessed, the mountain homes of the dark concoctors were filled with endless supplies of medicinal ingredients. There were beast bones, medicinal plants, strange rocks and pebbles, and other things that he had never seen before. A quick glance proved that, although these things looked real, just like the entire world around them, they were actually partly real and partly illusory. However, they would suffice to concoct some medicinal pills. As for what kinds of pills they would make, it was hard to say at the moment. But Bai Xiaochun didn't need to spend time considering the subject. He just needed the dark concoctors to surrender. If I want to get past this level, I have to make these dark concoctors bow their heads. Taking a deep breath, he sped from one tribal headquarters to another, using all of the skills he had developed in the wildlands to perfect effect. He was like a locust that swept through the mountains, taking everything down to the grass and roots. Unfortunately, there was a huge number of tribal headquarters, some large and some small. Despite how skilled he was at this sort of thing, he didn't have time to visit them all. After about 2 hours passed, he had gone through about 70%, which was when the imps began to regain their senses. As they regained lucidity, and thought back to all of the dreadful things that they had done in the past 2 hours, they began to shout loudly in rage. I'm gonna kill you. The dark concoctors will destroy you or die in the attempt. Test tube. You're dead. G. I hereby swear that in the end, either you will exist, or the dark concoctors will, but not both. Innumerable imps raged with more madness than they ever had in their entire lives. It was a level of fury that reached into the heavens, spawned by a humiliation the likes of which could never be expunged. By now, they no longer wanted Bai Xiaochun to be their test tube. The only thing they wanted to do was torment him for 10,000 years. All of them began to produce mystery pills that had either been passed down through the generations in their clans, or that they had personally concocted. From the way their murderous auras raged to the heavens, it seemed they would be willing to destroy the world if it meant getting their hands on Bai Xiaochun. One could only imagine the battle of medicinal pills that would erupt if they found him. However, by the time the dark concoctors devolved into a maelstrom of anger, Bai Xiaochun had already taken steps to prevent them from finding him. Having learned from his initial mistake of staying in one place, he was now moving from place to place via teleportation. On the one hand, he was truly shocked by how quickly the imps had recovered, but on the other hand, wasn't willing to just give up. HMPH, you people just wait, things aren't over yet. He quickly produced a collection of small pill furnaces, as well as a few larger ones, and began to concoct. You think I'm afraid of a little war of attrition? Gritting his teeth, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture and began to divide the medicinal plants up and then throw them into the pill furnaces, which quickly began to vibrate. Once Bai Xiaochun started concocting medicine, he would quickly sink into a state of madness. His eyes were already bloodshot as he focused, not on making pills, but on creating unusual side effects. Before long, the dark concoctors found his current hiding place, where the pill furnaces were already bright red, and showing signs of imminent explosion. In the past, Bai Xiaochun would have been shocked and terrified at such a sight, but now, he was beaming with joy. Flicking his sleeve, he sent the pill furnaces flying out into the open. He didn't even aim them. He just sent them flying out randomly. Moments later, booms began to ring out one after another, followed by the enraged roars of the imps. At that point, he vanished, reappearing in another hiding place, where he continued his concocting work. 3 days passed, and the dark concoctors were even more angry than before. To them, the past 3 days had been pure torment. Not only was the force of the exploding pill furnaces tremendous in general, but Bai Xiaochun had especially large pill furnaces that were extremely shocking to the diminutive dark concoctors. And there was more to it than that. On the 3rd day, dark clouds formed in the sky, and acid rain began to fall. When the acid rain hit the imps, their clothing melted, and they were racked with incredible pain. Even the ground began to corrode, as did the mountain peaks. Heavens! This is no ordinary acid raid. This stuff is hypertoxic. Damn it, damn it, damn it. The imps were completely swept up in raging madness. But then, violet lightning bolts began to fall from the sky, smashing into the ground over and over again in completely relentless fashion. Soon, none of the dark concoctors dared to even go out into the open. They could only cower in their mountain caves. And yet, the biggest tribulation of all had yet to come. Mist began to seep into their caves. It was extremely pungent, and to the horror of the dark concoctors, it contained some of the effects of both aphrodisiac pills and fantasy pills. In the past, they had experienced this horror for 2 short hours, but now, it was happening without stop. Heavens, how could this be happening? No, just let me die. This is impossible. What sin did we dark concoctors commit? Why is God punishing us in this way? However, the dark concoctors were tenacious to the core, and definitely not the type who would surrender easily. That was only to be expected from a people who had so thoroughly impressed the sovereign to whom the damaged fan once belonged. Most other folk would have collapsed by this point. After all, the dark concoctors had already suffered so many setbacks that it didn't seem possible for it to get any worse. First was the deluge of acid rain, then the violet lightning, both of which left the entire world riddled with pits and craters. It was so bad it seemed like the land might be wiped out of existence soon. The mountain peaks were equally devastated, full of holes, and almost devoid of vegetation. The entire world had been severely damaged. Furthermore, the medicinal mist which had begun to spread out now filled the mountains. It was like the final straw for the dark concoctors, something that pushed them to the point of wishing they could die. And that was not even to mention that pill furnaces continued to explode here and there, the noise and reverberations of which made it impossible for the imps to get any rest. It was torment that most living beings would not be able to endure. And yet, despite that, and despite the moaning and groaning that could be heard constantly, the dark concoctors endured. For an entire month. In the end, even Bai Xiaochun had to admit that he admired them. Although they were infuriating, each and every one had what it took to be a good apothecary. I should really show some respect to apothecaries like this. Bai Xiaochun was fully convinced that he needed to use his remaining supplies to continue working, to continue researching new side effects. Only by doing that could he show that he was a truly mighty apothecary. And therefore, he sank deeper into his work, producing even more mystery pills and freakish side effects. It was truly a thing of nightmares. 3 long months passed. By this time, the dark concoctors wept on a daily basis. Some of them seemed to be gasping their last breaths, racked by despair. During the months which had passed, they had used every trick in the book to try to negate the medicines assailing them, all to no avail. They were completely demoralized by the terrifying entity they were up against. We're not afraid of dying. Nor are we afraid of our people being wiped out of existence. We're not even afraid of humiliation. But being crushed by medicinal pills in this way leaves us stripped of our ideals, stripped of our passion in life. This is truly the worst of all possible nightmares. He's not human. He's a pill devil. He's a monster of medicinal pills. We thought early on that he had shown his truly terrifying nature. How could he possibly have only become more and more terrifying? Oh, heavens! How could a person like this even exist? Why did we dark concoctors have to meet this person? For the first time since this world was created, the leaders of the various tribes all met together. They braved the terrifying toxic smoke and mist, somehow controlling their impulses to have a short meeting. During the meeting, the leaders all reached an agreement. Originally, none of them had been willing to surrender, but now, they all agreed that the mystery pill devil had to be driven away. All of the dark concoctors agreed on this point. As soon as the news broke, all of the imps, even the ones who seemed to be on their last legs, began to shout out at the tops of their lungs. Make him leave. We can't afford to provoke him anymore. Get him out of here. Make him leave. We'll do anything. This world was part of the damaged fan, and had been created by a sovereign from the immortal world. Furthermore, it had been forged using the Tao essence of life and death, and therefore, as long as the dark concoctors all agreed, then not even the spirit automaton could do anything to change the result. As for that spirit automaton, he had reached a state of madness even earlier than the dark concoctors, and that was just from watching things play out. He finally realized that he had underestimated Bai Xiaochun. Not only was Bai Xiaochun just generally shameless, but he was especially shameless in his pill concocting. In all the years the spirit automaton had existed, this was definitely the most shameless entity he had ever come across. The mere thought of how the dark concoctors had surrendered was profoundly shocking to him. They were even praised by the sovereign for the way they would never surrender. But now, they're actually giving up. The boy was almost crying. He had originally planned to trap Bai Xiaochun in this level for 10,000 years or so, but now, in only a few days, the dark concoctors had given in, and the world around them was almost completely destroyed. Even as the boy looked on begrudgingly, the dark concoctors came to an agreement, and Bai Xiaochun, who was completely immersed in concocting pills, suddenly began to dematerialize. I refuse to accept this. The spirit automaton said through gritted teeth, feelings of depression exploding into being inside of him. How shameless of you, Bai Xiaochun, you despicable bastard. How could you possibly be named Bai Xiaochun? You sully that name. Your surname should be He. And your given name should be Dawu. Damn you, He Dawu. You just wait until the next time I wake up. I'll destroy you. I'll end you. I'll eradicate you for all time. The boy's face twisted with the ultimate level of madness and rage. 1. Meanwhile, on the fan rib outside of the 30th level, Bai Xiaochun faded into being, a shocked look on his face. Huh? How did I get out? Shaking his head in surprise, he quickly checked his bag of holding, and just as he had suspected, the pills he had successfully concocted during his time in the 30th level were nowhere to be seen. Well, I guess this means I passed the 30th level. He couldn't help but sigh. After all, the 30th level had been filled with people who had the same calling in life as himself. Being able to duel with them using medicine had been a real joy. He almost wished he hadn't been teleported away. That was the perfect place to concoct pills. It's an illusory world created by the will of the sovereign, in which I don't have to bear any responsibility for the results of my pill concocting. That's what I've always wanted. Wait, hold on. I should check to see if I can go back in. He tried to do just that, but quickly found that there was a powerful force of expulsion pushing back at him that made it impossible for him to get inside. Meanwhile, within that 30th level, the dark concoctors looked up at the sky rippling, and began to tremble in fear. But soon, they realized that the mystery pill devil was unable to enter their world again. Sighs of relief could be heard, and many eyes brimmed with tears of excitement. Many of them even produced drums and gongs and began to celebrate loudly. Finally, he's finally gone. And he can't get back in. The heavens do have eyes. That crazy devil was the worst plague to ever hit us. We dark concoctors are always honest and kind-hearted. We're good people. Good people aren't supposed to be subjected to bullying. What a nightmare. I can't even bear to think of what happened over the past few months. And I've also decided to stop concocting mystery pills. I swear it. From now, I'll only concoct ordinary medicinal pills. As the dark concoctors rejoiced, Bai Xiaochun slumped dejectedly outside on the fan rib. After thinking about the matter for a while, he sighed. Whatever. One day when I'm the true owner of the fan, I'll go back to have another pill duel with them. Sighing, he realized that he had been in the damaged fan for quite some time. Wondering what might have happened in the Eternal Lands during that time, he prepared to leave. However, it was in that very moment that he realized that out in the void beyond the damaged fan, something was moving in his direction. It was an enormous palace. It was severely damaged, but still emanated a grandiose aura, as well as dazzling blue light. Bai Xiaochun's expression turned serious, and his heart began to pound with anticipation. Although he hadn't spent much time on the damaged fan, on previous occasions when he was not inside one of the levels, he had often looked out into the inky darkness of the void. At first, it had been with curiosity, but later with boredom. After all, it wasn't even a starry sky, it was just darkness. It was like an enclosed room in which all the candles had been extinguished. It was terrifyingly quiet, with nothing at all visible except the sea of darkness. Therefore, this palace with its blue light seemed almost like a bright star, and was eye-catching to the extreme. How could Bai Xiaochun not be excited by this sudden development? In fact, he blurred into motion, heading to the edge of the fan, where he stood and watched the huge palace flying closer and closer to him. As it neared, he could see that it was actually only one corner of an even larger palace structure, as if it had broken off from the whole. And as it got closer, it was clear that the entire thing was hovering on the brink of falling apart. Black bloodstains were visible, dried up for what must have been many, many years. All in all, it looked like this palace had undergone a catastrophe of world-destroying proportions. After observing it for a bit, Bai Xiaochun felt the impulse to go explore it. But the cautious side of him quickly squashed that dangerous idea. But out here in this strange, dark void, this sudden spot of light that was the palace was profoundly intriguing. And he couldn't dispel the notion that it would be a real pity to abandon it. What if there's some good loot inside, he thought. After looking down at the damaged fan, and then up again at the palace, his eyes glittered as he came up with an idea. That palace is obviously not very sturdy. And definitely not as strong as this sovereign-level precious treasure. With that, he drew upon his ability to control the damaged fan, which was now at 30%. After all, he had already passed the 30th level, and was thus able to somewhat influence the direction the fan moved in. As he sent his divine sense out, the fan vibrated a bit. Thankfully, the spirit automaton had already fallen into slumber, otherwise it would have been very difficult for Bai Xiaochun to succeed in this effort. Just like that, the fan changed directions, and began to head directly toward the palace. In that very moment, Bai Xiaochun could see that the previously calm and quiet palace suddenly began to tremble. The blue light that had been shining out of it was sucked back in, and then a moment later was projected back out in the form of an enormous, vicious head with two horns sticking out of it. Looking in the direction of Bai Xiaochun and the damaged fan, it let out a soundless roar. At the same time, a burst of holy Archaean power erupted out from the illusory head. An Archaean Soul, Bai Xiaochun blurted, his eyes going wide. Few other people would be able to identify such a thing. But Bai Xiaochun was a heavenly necromancer and had immense experience working with souls. Therefore, it only took a single glance for him to realize that the head being projected out of the palace by means of the blue light was none other than an Archaean Soul. Presumably, some Archaean expert of the past had died in this palace. Then, because of some unique characteristic of the palace, or perhaps because of other reasons, the soul of that dead expert remained behind, fused with the palace itself. Although the soul was no longer intelligent and aware of its surroundings, it still existed. The blue light was obviously some sort of defensive trap. If Bai Xiaochun had blithely tried to enter the palace, he would have been attacked by the Archaean Soul. Instead, with the damaged fan barreling toward it, the Archaean Soul had no choice but to reveal itself. As it howled noiselessly, ripples spread out through the void, a formless attack aimed at the damaged fan. Bai Xiaochun's face fell, and he backed away from the edge of the fan. However, as soon as the ripples reached the fan itself, it was to his delight that he realized that they didn't do anything to it at all, not even slow it down. In fact, they apparently suffered from an automated backlash attack by the fan. The fluctuations which rolled out from the fan surpassed those of the Archaean Soul, filled with a power that caused Bai Xiaochun to gasp. He was even slightly injured just from their presence. This was something far, far beyond the power of an Archaean. It was something Bai Xiaochun had never felt before, the power of a sovereign. The void vibrated in response, and the eyes of that enormous blue head went wide with shock. It tried to retreat, but couldn't do so quickly enough, and the sovereign-level power slammed into the palace. The enormous palace shuddered to a stop in the middle of the void. Then, to Bai Xiaochun's shock, it rippled and distorted until it transformed into a beam of light that shot toward the fan. It was almost as if the fan was dragging it toward itself. Moments later, the palace vanished. Bai Xiaochun looked around, barely able to breathe. He was fairly certain he knew what had happened. He looked down at the fan, beads of sweat dripping down his face as he realized that he had definitely underestimated this precious treasure. Before, the image on the fan's face had featured a mountain and a river with a boat in it, within which two people were playing Go. But now, at the source of that river, a palace was visible. It became a part of the picture, it became a part of the face of the fan. His eyes went wide, and his mind spun. This development completely surpassed his powers of imagination. After taking a moment to let it all sink in, his face fell. I just wanted to explore it and see if it had any treasures inside. Even if it didn't, an Archaean soul would be great to have. But this fan just went and ate it. He almost felt like crying at how badly he had lost out. Not quite willing to give up, he sent some divine sense over to the palace, drawing upon the 30% of the fan that he could control to see if he could pull the palace out of the picture. As soon as he sent his divine sense out, the river stopped flowing for a short moment. When it resumed flowing a moment later, a drop of water shot out from it and flew toward the palace. When it hit it, the palace flickered with bright light, and emitted what sounded like a defiant roar. The water spread out, covering the blue light. Then it began to wrench at the palace, ripping away fully a third of it. Then it vanished, to reappear in Bai Xiaochun's hand. Heart racing, Bai Xiaochun stared in shock at the drop of water floating above his palm, within which was a bit of blue light. Upon examining it closer, he could see a vicious head within that blue light, radiating an aura of anger and violence. The head couldn't escape from the water no matter how much it battered at it. Furthermore, based on the aura it emitted, Bai Xiaochun could tell that this was the Archaean Soul. However, it was only about 30% as powerful as a true Archaean Soul. For Bai Xiaochun, that was more than enough. I can't believe I can do this, he said, licking his lips. Then he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. A fan that shares. I love it. He was very excited to understand how truly strong this fan was. And after it absorbed things, it would share those things with him in proportion to how much he controlled the fan. One day, when he was truly its owner, he could easily dominate all existence. It was a truly exciting thought. Yet again, he realized that everything he had done to get this fan was definitely worth it. Alright, I need to go back and get some rest. Savoring the beauty of the fact that he had acquired a portion of an Archaean soul, he sent out a thought, and vanished. After reappearing in his private chamber in Misty Sea Prefecture in the north, he sent some divine sense out to find that the Grand Heaven Master had apparently sensed his return, and was hurrying over to talk with him. What happened? Bai Xiaochun wondered, surprised. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.